Hello, beloved. Welcome to my little corner here. I'm inspired today to share about intimacy. And this is not a word that on an everyday basis I tend to hear, at least in my little corner of the world, in the circles that I run in. Intimacy is not always actually considered as like a luxury or something that people talk about a lot, because people are very much in survival mode, very anxious, very worried, just trying to get through, just trying to pay their bills, trying to find love, a lot of striving. And I feel very led to live a full life that is more intimate. And when we break down intimacy and what it is, and the synonyms and antonyms of intimacy, they're all words that we use on a everyday basis, but sometimes a word can take on a new meaning, a new perspective for us that really just strongly resonates for us. And that is something that I want to share about today in my pursuit of living a life with more purpose and intimacy. Now, intimacy in itself is really about a deep knowing, a closeness, and a connection. The feeling of closeness and connection. And this can be not just in the physical plane, right? This is emotional, intellectual, spiritual. And a lot of these areas will overlap, but they can also be broken down into different parts of our lives that we can give nourishment and attention to. So when it comes to physical, intimacy can be about a touch, right? A caress, to full sexual intercourse. And then all of the things in between, hugs, glances, all of these things that build what we might call romance, right? Then there's the emotional, the deep sharing of thoughts, feelings, deep conversations that require active listening and empathy, and non-judgmental support, right? And then there's intellectual, the sharing of ideas and concepts and perspectives and finding that common ground, right? And then spiritual, shared values, shared beliefs, shared sense of purpose. And those are all really beautiful things. Again, the beautiful thing about incorporating this into your life and in your journeys, you can work on this in pieces, and one will always affect the other. So intimacy is really about more of a deep knowing, right? And we know that has to do in relationships, right? We mostly think about it as relationships with our partners, significant others. But intimacy goes into all of our relationships. It goes into our close friendships, our close family members, and even our colleagues, right? And knowing when those boundaries need to kick in. So intimacy is so deeply needed too in our world right now, and how we look at things. It invokes words like tenderness and fragility, longing and caress, warmth, understanding, affection, kinship, gentleness, compassion, vulnerability, right? Intimacy can bring out a vulnerability about us, and that is beautiful. Many people believe that it is a weakness, but vulnerability is a superpower. And when you open up to people, it brings a shared goal, that deep connection, and allows other people to see you. Safety, softness. There's a lot of words that we can use that really bring out the essence of this word and how it can resonate for us in this life. But I think an area that we really don't talk about is self-intimacy. It's really about bringing self-love, self-care to our identity. And identity is a word that's really thrown around a lot also, and can take on different concepts. Everybody has a different interpretation of what identity is. Many will say it's your will, mind, and emotions all together. That's a really basic way. Going more deeply, it is the essence, the identity, who you are authentically. Another word that's thrown around a lot. Really, in essence, your divine being, where the peace, love, joy, the deepness of who you are, the creator you is. And then we take on different identities throughout our life, or roles, however you want to be defined, whether or not it's a momentary ego that we're taking on, or it's a whole persona that we're taking on that we want to adopt in our life. So identity is really important, because without having that relationship, self-love and care and deep knowing of yourself, it's really hard to have intimacy with others. And it's also really hard to be intimate with ourselves if we've experienced any form of trauma or abuse that has led to PTSD, CPTSD, because it really makes it hard for us to feel grounded, to feel safe. And when we don't feel grounded and we don't feel safe within ourselves, it's hard to really connect with who we are. I can remember in certain parts of my journey, which has been rife with conflict and strife and a lot of trauma, and to CPTSD, complex PTSD, because of childhood trauma, specifically sexual abuse, which really breaks down your sense of identity and who you are. And this can make it really confusing. Certain parts of your life you can have peace, and after you've done some healing work, you can start to feel really good about yourself and really start to rise and shine. But then parts of you that aren't healed, because healing is not a linear line. It's the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, the taking off the top of what rises to the top when we're going through an episode or a healing part of our journey. And then we have to deal with that. So it's so much survival. Just being able to exist and trying to be happy is like intimacy is an illusion. Intimacy is nothing tangible that we can reach, because there's never time. We might get a glimpse of it, but it quickly dissipates and disappears without that strong sense of knowing of who we are. So the idea of intimacy is a beautiful, very real thing, but we've got to be able to dial it back. Most of us have experienced some form of trauma in our life, whether or not it evolves into a PTSD or CPTSD, where you really have difficulty connecting with yourself and with others. It makes it very difficult, right? So breaking it down into steps, and I would definitely encourage you to seek counseling, therapy, to talk some of this out, gain a real sense of clarity if you're having a hard time with living daily life, hard time showing up every day. We're all going to have off days, but if it is really hard to operate, you might want to consider therapy. And talk therapy by itself, I don't believe fixes everything. I think it's a good starting point, but then there's things you need to release, right? Somatically, you need to let things go because trauma is stored in our bodies. And again, when you're in that survival mode, when is there time for intimacy, right? Sexual intercourse in of it by itself is a need people have, that release, that connection with people. And a lot of people can find that in various different ways through their partners, whether it's a one-time thing or it's an ongoing commitment, or whether or not that you engage in masturbation, right? Very controversial thing for some people, especially in faith communities, but it is a way to introduce sensuality to yourself, to get to know yourself if you are fragile in that area, because you know yourself best. And it can help build self-trust, self-love, self-care, to really bring in the pleasure side of things, especially if you have abuse. But always seek out professional counseling if you are having any forms of depression, major anxieties, where it's really hard for you to function. But for a lot of people who have gone through healing and the healing journey, it's really about detoxing and reconnecting with yourself. And that's the longest part of the journey for most people. Again, if you have not faced this and this is bringing up and triggering you, then really take out some time and really sit with yourself and reflect and take that first step to get that help. I'm not a licensed counselor. I am a life coach. And I have a passion for helping people to really connect with themselves through self-love, self-care, and really finding who they are so that they can be the best they can be in relationships. And that relationship with yourself is the most prominent, right? We've all heard at some point in our lives, you can't give away that which you don't have. So if you don't love yourself, you don't have true compassion for yourself, it's hard to give it away. You can do it momentarily and through waves, but the deep essence of yourself is kind of lost. So really that is a wonderful place to start, is the intimacy with yourself. And you can start as simple as hugging yourself. There's a lot of things you can do to tell yourself you're safe. And there's a lot of really great exercises out there to help ground you. And that's not the purpose of today's video. It was an introduction to intimacy and the journey of intimacy and how important it is in our lives and connections with people, so we can have healthy relationships with ourselves, healthier relationships with our higher self and our creator. Whatever you call your higher power, there is a relationship there, even with your spiritual guides and team. And if you are longing for a more deeper connection with them, then really start to look at intimate ways that you can connect with yourself and then with your creator, with your higher self. Because all of that is fluid. It all works together to help in this healing journey. It's also really hard to be intimate with ourselves if we're at war with ourselves, especially if we don't like ourselves. And that is something that I've experienced in my life, a self-hatred for myself at times, and just trying to get by. And that is really hard to be able to live the life that you desire, to live the life that you are going after, to have that peace and flow, to be at that higher vibration and frequency if you have self-loathing beneath the surface. So, beloved, it might be time for you to become really honest with yourself, where you could use more self-love and compassion, more fragility with yourself, and ways that you can be vulnerable so that you can show up for yourself, right? Not abandoning yourself, showing up for yourself. And that one little kindness that you can do might really break some illusions and break some patterns for you so that you can really grow in this area. And you can find some really beautiful ways to start being intimate with yourself. For me in my healing journey, I have really started to connect with the color rose gold for personal healing reasons, different visions and things I've had in my healing journey. And I felt really led to buy a little rose gold colored pen, very minor, but it feels more intimate to me as I'm writing out my journaling, writing out my research, anything I want to do. So I'm just connecting with it more. So little things that you can do for yourself to bring intimacy even to your space, your environment, very important. Things that bring you joy, peace, things you love looking at and using. And there's many different terms that we can use for it, but I'm going to stick with the word intimacy. Building an intimacy with your environment, with everywhere that you go. It's a softness. It is the divine feminine in action, intimacy. Very beautiful concepts, that ones that I'm really excited to explore more of for myself, but for you and in your relationships. I want you to thrive in your relationships, because our connection with people, our soul tribe, even if it's for a minute second, for a lifetime of commitment, is so important. But again, it's more important that you show up for yourself first. Get to know yourself on a deep, loving way, and that can't help but radiate to others. And that's just the beginning, beloved. So I really want to encourage you to go ahead and look at this area in your life of where can you afford to be more intimate, because it is so important. It's not to give yourself away, and it's definitely deeper than any kind of sex and sex talk. It is a way of living and being that can really change your life. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate you giving me your time, your effort. And if you feel so inclined, hit like, subscribe, and stick around for what other things might come out of this intimacy and intimacy journey for yourself. So thank you. Be blessed.